Tanigikekele FM.
Munyarwanda, isuku ni isoko y'ubuzima. Zirikana ko isuku ku bagize umuryango wawe ari inshingano zawe. Isuku kuri buri munyarwanda, igihugu kizira indwara. Radio Imanzi, 105.1 FM.
We got you updated. This is Radio Imanzi, news in English.
Good evening, dear listener. Thank you for tuning in. This is Radio Imanzi 105.1 FM, broadcasting from Kigali. Here are the news in English, brought to you by Alvin Umngari. The headlines. Honorable Vansaviruta received the Polish Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Paweł Jablonski, who is in Kigali for a 3-day working visit where they discussed the status of Rwanda-Poland bilateral relations and new areas of cooperation. Prime Minister Edouard Ngirente delivers remarks during the launch of the 5th edition of Rwanda Mining Week that kicked off on December 5th. South Sudan to send 750 troops for regional forces in Congo. The East African Court of Justice has ended its rotational interstate court session in Uganda, where it determined cases related to violations by member states to the East African Community Treaty. We'll be back with news in detail. Thank you. Welcome back. Paweł Jablonski, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, on Monday announced that his country will soon establish an embassy in Kigali, in part to the growing bilateral ties between the two countries. Jablonski is leading a delegation of more than 20 Polish companies in various sectors for a 3-day visit to Rwanda. Deputy Minister Jablonski said the opening of our embassy depends very strongly on cooperation of our two governments, and also it normally takes several months for the necessary preparations, including the regulatory work. But I assure you that we want to do it as quickly as possible to have two embassies working to foster the relations of both countries. During the 3-day visit, at least 3 agreements are expected to be signed in defense, education, and investment, a move that will be capitalized on to further strengthen bilateral cooperation. Jablonski further said Poland is positioning itself as Rwanda's top destination in regards to education. We have more than 1,200 Rwandan students, which is the largest number of students from one country. 2 universities, including the University of Rwanda and Rwanda Polytechnic, will benefit from the agreement. Rwanda and Poland already cooperate in the area of education and trade. Last year, Kigali opened an embassy in Warsaw, Poland. Poland has also supported the School of Blind Children in Kibeho, in Nyaruguru district, and an estimated 1,800 students have been enrolled in Polish universities to date. Prime Minister Edouard Ngirente has emphasized that Rwanda's mining potential is yet to be fully exploited, adding that there are preliminary studies that indicate significant mineral reserves across the country. He was speaking during the launch of the 5th edition of Rwanda Mining Week that kicked off on December 5th, bringing together different industry players, investors, and government officials to discuss progress in the sector under the theme Towards a Modern and Sustainable Mining Sector. This edition will feature discussions on the modernization of the mining sector, mineral exploitation, environmental protection, and safety standards, as well as available opportunities for market and investment, coupled with a 4-day exhibition of local sourced and made products. Ngirente highlighted that recognizing the need to invest in exploration and production of minerals, the government is committed to work with all stakeholders to develop the mining sector to sustainably deliver deliver good results. Investments are needed in mineral exploitation and processing for value addition, provision, financing, and transformation of our mining practices. Rwanda's National Strategy for Transformation, NST1, has a bracket that aims at increasing and translating the mining into larger exports. Rwanda Investigation Bureau has confirmed to have in custody 3 suspects who are being prosecuted for a role in the death of Emmanuel Muhizi, who worked as a truck driver in Kabuga. The suspects are Eli Ahishakiye, the manager of the bar where the victim was beaten from, Jean-Claude Habiyaremye, the bouncer, and Juvenal Nshizimpumu, the security guard. Thierry Murangira, Rwanda Investigation Bureau spokesperson, said the victim passed away on November 28th after being intentionally assaulted by the mentioned suspects, which resulted in his death. Murangira pointed out that during the preliminary investigation, they admitted to beating the victim as revenge, arguing that this year in August, he and his friend, identified as Arthur Niyonsenga, had beaten and injured their friend, and later on Niyonsenga was arrested while Muhizi fled. They are all arrested at Rusororo Rib Station, pending investigation and filed to be submitted to prosecution. Meanwhile, the dead body has been sent to Rwanda Forensic Laboratory for further examination. Upon conviction, the suspects are liable to be imprisoned for 15 years but no more than 20 years, and a fine of $5 million Rwandan francs, and no more than 7 million Rwandan francs because the assault or battery has caused death. People seeking driver's license will no longer have to wait for a long time to do paper-based provision and definitive tests after Rwanda National Police decentralized its driving test services to 16 sites in different parts of the country. The Inspector General of Police, IGP Dan Munyuza, on Saturday, December 3rd, briefed teams of police officers who will be dispatched to the sites to start conducting continuous driving tests. The Rwanda National Police spokesperson, Commissioner of Police CP Jean Bosco Kabera, said the decentralization of driving tests is part of the Rwanda National Police strategies to take services closer to people. Registration for either provisional, computer or paper-based or definitive test is now open-ended, and the 16 driving test sites in regions will now be operating every day and facilitate the big numbers of candidates registering for definitive and paper-based tests. He added practical tests at these sites that will be conducted from Monday to Friday, but paper-based provision tests will be allocated specific days during the week. Registration and booking is done online through Irembo. Candidates will choose the sites of their choice, and the system will automatically schedule the date when the candidate will do either provisional or definitive tests, but also confirm the venue and the time. CP Kabera continues saying people will no longer have to wait for a long time or travel long distances. You can now register for a driving test at any time of your convenience. Yamina Karitanyi, the CEO of Rwanda Mines Petroleum and Gas Board, RMB, say there are valuable gains made over the years with a transition from artisanal to modern mining techniques, and called on stakeholders to support the growth and professionalization of the mining sector. According to data from RMB, from January to September 2022, the sector generated $585 million in export revenue, growing from $516 million in 2021, which was a slow year due to low prices on global markets. Once the sector performs at maximum potential, the target is to reach $1.5 billion in revenue by 2024. Jean-Malik Kalima, the chairperson of Rwanda Mining Association, said there is continued growth in the number of local miners, including more women finding interest in the sector, as well as capacity building offered by the University of Rwanda in mining faculty. Rwanda continues to promote value addition to gain more revenue from processed mineral exports, boosting a gold refinery, a tin smelter, and a coltan refinery that is in the pipeline. We'll be back with new economic news.
Economic news is a regular feature on Radio Imanzi.
The trading session recorded a turnover of 94,037,500 rand and francs worth of bonds traded in 2 deals on the fixed income market and 221,000 rand and francs from 1,000 shares traded in 2 deals on the equities market. The equities counters closed as follow: Bank of Kigali with 272 rand and francs, Bralirwa with 170 rand and francs, I&M Rwanda with 43 rand and francs, Simerwa with 120 rand and francs, MTN Rwanda at 175 rand and francs, Equity at 440 rand and francs, Kenya Commercial Bank at 370 rand and francs, National Media Group at 1,200 rand and francs, Uchumi Supermarket Limited at 104 rand and francs, and Arundel Buffalo at 526 rand and francs. The exchange rate today: the United States dollar was buying 1,049 rand and francs and was selling 1,070 rand and francs. The British pound was buying 1,294 rand and francs and was selling 1,320 rand and francs. The euro was buying 1,109 rand and francs and was selling 1,132 rand and francs. The Kenyan shilling was buying 8.5 rand and francs and was selling 8.7 rand and francs. The Tanzanian shilling was buying 0.44 rand and francs and was selling 0.45 rand and francs. The Ugandan shilling was buying 0.28 rand and francs and was selling 0.28 rand and francs. The Burundian francs was buying 0.50 rand and francs and was selling 0.51 rand and francs. We'll be back shortly with international news.
Some items of international news on Radio Imanzi.
The East African Court of Justice has ended its rotational interstate court session in Uganda, where it determined cases related to violations by member states of the East African Community Treaty. The president of the regional court, Nestor Kayobera, said the 40 days that the court held in its session in Kampala at the Commercial Division of the High Court saw a total of 40 cases disposed of. East African Court of Justice held court from November 2nd to December 2nd, ending its annual rotation of sessions in a member country. Mr. Kayobera told the media on Friday during this period the court handled 40 cases. The Appellate Division handled matters regarding the revocation of sales agreement, terms of employment of the East African Community on criminal defamation. All the cases were handled were about the violation of the treaty by the partner states. A handful of African companies have finally started shipping goods under the long-delayed African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. They are a part of a new initiative to kickstart intra-African trade. Kenya has shipped locally made car and truck batteries as well as a consignment of Kenyan-grown tea to Ghana in the past months. Rwanda has also exported processed coffee beans to the West African nation. Nixon Paloma, the group finance officer at Associated Battery Manufacturers, said it's a positive move. The firm is one of only 2 companies in Kenya taking part in a pilot project called the Guided Trade Initiative. The initiative gives companies dealing in certain products in selected countries support through the African Continental Free Trade Area process. The idea is to test and prove the African Continental Free Trade Area system works and get into regional trade finally rolling under African Continental Free Trade Area, as well as Kenya, Rwanda, and Ghana. And it includes Cameroon, Egypt, Mauritius, Tanzania, and Tunisia. The world's largest free trade area became operational with much fanfare on January 1st, 2021, but the implementation of the single continental market has been delayed for several reasons, from the COVID pandemic to the lack of agreement on the rules of origin from some product lines and the failure of 10 out of the 54 signatories to rectify it. South Sudan is to send 750 troops for regional forces in Congo. The South Sudan military says more than 700 personnel will travel to eastern Congo to join a new regional force in trying to calm the ongoing unrest caused by armed groups. The spokesman for South Sudan military, Major General Lu Kong, told the Associated Press that the government is working to provide the 750 troops with needed equipment for the combat mission, but he said sanctions on the country are complicated than effort. The United Nations earlier this year renewed an arms embargo on South Sudan, citing continuing deadly violence as the country slowly implements a 2018 peace deal that ends a 5-year civil war, and thousands of people are still being killed. According to local authorities and the United Nations, the South Sudanese military spokesman did not say how soon the troops will be sent to eastern Congo, and the forces are still under training and they are still at the preparatory level. Earlier this year, leaders of the seven-nation East African community resolved to create and deploy a regional force to eastern Congo, where dozens of armed groups are active. Kenya has a leading role in the regional force and in Congo peace efforts, and South Sudan's military spokesman spoke to the Associated Press after Kenyan President William Ruto visited South Sudan over the weekend. South Sudan President Salva Kiir last week said his country will contribute to regional security despite having its own challenges at home. Expectations are high behind the Single African Air Transport Market, an initiative aimed at creating a single unified air transport market in Africa. Once operational, new routes should be easier to launch without the need for reciprocal services, and 17 African countries, including Rwanda, out of a total of 35 country signatories, have now agreed to test the initiative. The 17 airline will now open their air transport market to each other as part of a new Single African Air Transport Market project implementation pilot expected to kick off this week. The air transport plan could eventually generate $4.2 billion in additional gross domestic product, 600,000 new jobs, a 27% reduction in fares, and make a contribution to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Rwanda Civil Aviation Authority, the Director General Silas Udahimuka, said the local airline will benefit from the market share as it will have more routes with unrestricted traffic rights, and the number of flights or frequency will increase. The general economic growth impacted by new employment and tourism thriving due to more passenger traffic, the local aviation industry will get an equitable share of the overall gross domestic product. He continued saying it's an opportunity to continue with the already ongoing investments with the local aviation industry in terms of aviation infrastructure developments and more airlines flying to Kigali International Airport or more routes to Rwanda, which all require expanded airport and air navigation facilities. And that brings us to the end of today's program. Let us look at the headlines once more. Honorable Vensa Biruta received the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Paweł Jablonski, who is in Kigali for a 3-day working visit where they discussed the status of Rwanda-Poland bilateral relations and new areas of cooperation. Prime Minister Edouard Ngirente delivers remarks during the launch of the 5th edition of Rwanda Mining Week that kicked off on December 5th. South Sudan is to send 750 troops for regional forces in Congo. The East African Court of Justice has ended its rotational interstate court session in Uganda, where it determined cases related to violations by member states of the East African Community Treaty. Thank you for staying with me. This was Alvin Ungari on Radio Imanzi. Stay tuned. My colleagues are going to broadcast the sports, South Korea versus Brazil. So stay tuned for the game. Have a wonderful night. Stay safe and stay warm.